Hi there, I'm Rachel Neylan, Olympic and professional cyclist, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Endure IQ's online long-distance triathlon courses and Pogo Physio. I'm Brad Beer, sports physiotherapist and exercise scientist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week, we'll bring you the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your physical best. And of course, we do this across a range of different episodes: interest editions, coaches' corners, expert editions, and featured performers. And on this week's episode 248, we are keeping the featured performer theme running. In fact, we're going to run with this right through until Christmas before we recap the year and then kick off the year with some fantastic expert editions and learnings coming your way. But today you are in for a real treat, as you'll hear from Rachel Neylan, Australian Olympic cyclist, around her career highs, lows, and learnings. By way of bio, Rachel represented Australia at the Olympic Games in Rio in 2016, which was the culmination of a childhood dream, as you'll hear today. In 2012, Rachel picked up a stellar silver medal in the UCI World Cycling Championships. Rachel bases herself out of Europe, where she has also picked up multiple UCI World Championship event victories, and as we roll around to Tokyo 2021, is looking to secure her second Australian Olympic team berth. But aside from Rachel's sparkling sporting resume, it's really the story behind the success that's so interesting and inspiring. Rachel took up cycling, as you'll hear, late in life at 25 years of age, after graduating as a physiotherapist, working in the highest echelons of sport with Rowing Australia, before taking a bold leap of faith and embarking on a journey to become a world-class Australian athlete and ultimately Olympian. There are plenty of learnings to be had in this episode as Rachel shares around her underpinning philosophy throughout her sporting career to date. The Latin phrase gutta cavat lapidem, translated into constant dripping, wears away the stone. Rachel talks about the top 3 characteristics for performance, why using the word talent can be so dangerous, persisting through adversity, seizing opportunities, and Rachel survives the physical performance round, issues a wonderful physical challenge for the week, and challenges myself, and I'm sure many of the Physical Performance Show's followers, with dropping the label women's cycling. As Rachel says, it's one sport, female and male athletes, but we need to stop using the phrase women's cycling. So get ready with your pen and paper, plenty of learnings coming your way. Here is my conversation with Rachel Neylan, Australian professional and Olympic cyclist. Rachel Neylan, welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
It's lovely to be here.
Rachel, we have been working on this one for a little while. Prior to recording, you were in Europe, obviously racing as part of the Australian cycling team in the 2020 World Championships in what looked like an absolutely spectacular course in Imola.
Yeah, that's right. I was very proud to have represented Australia for the 5th time in my career. It was certainly a different World Championships this year. There was no fans along the roadside, and it was definitely a bubble. And it was quite uncertain because we didn't find out the race course until just a few weeks beforehand. So, yeah, I was very proud as always to pull on the green and gold. It wasn't exactly the best race of my life, unfortunately, but had a little bit of bad luck. But yeah, it was an honour all the same, and there's just a really great group of Australian cycling women racing over in Europe at the moment.
Rachel, it really looked like cycling in some ways led the world of sport with holding events. The tours, and then straight into the World Championships. A lot of sports were, I think, looking on going, wow, it's how, and it's great to see events going ahead. So as you said, you only found out a few weeks before the course. There must have been a lot of uncertainty going into it in terms of the event going ahead.
Yeah, that's right. I think we all just sort of went into, mental flexibility mode, and that was just really the theme of the whole year. For us over at Racing in Europe, and especially us Australians, some of us who came home during the lockdown. But certainly, leading into the season, we didn't know when we were going to start. We didn't know what the races were going to look like, what travel was going to look like, and looking back, I think we all sort of underestimate we were all on a sort of heightened state of arousal the whole time, because not only are you preparing to race, but you're also preparing for the fact that you could, you're putting yourself at risk of infection, and you're traveling, and, so it was, it was quite remarkable that all the races that actually went ahead did go ahead. But kudos to all of the team doctors and the teams who really, really put those bubbles around the athletes and cared for us all while we were racing, especially the Australian cycling team. We had a private chef, we had a hotel where we had one room to every athlete. The protocols were just really, really, second to none, and it was quite extraordinary actually to have experienced that.
As you say, Rachel, it's your fifth time representing Australia, including the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. Before we touch on career highs, let's go back and get the genesis story. I really enjoy your story from what I've researched to date. You didn't start off on a bike, quite the opposite. Can you take us through a young Rachel Neylan's early athletic days?
Wow. Oh, it's I still have to pinch myself, I was I'm one of, I guess I would say I'm just born and bred an athlete. My first memory of the Olympic Games was in 1992, at waking up at 4 a.m. to watch the Olympic Games, and I really didn't have any idea of what competitive sport was back then. I wasn't from a competitive sporting family, so to speak. We were healthy and active. But then I got introduced to little athletics, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. I would help my mum pack all the kids in the car and get all the food ready for the day with little athletics, and I'd make sure that I'd get there just in time for my warm-up. And this was me at the age of, 10 years old. So I just became obsessed with sport, with athletics, and everything that came along with it, and just the process of preparing. And I think you could say that I was just I was mesmerised by watching Australian athletes compete on the world stage from a very, very young age. I was a runner. I did little athletics until like my teenage years. Competed at state and national level, but never really crossed that line to be able to put on a green and gold tracksuit, which was ultimately my dream. And as a teenager, I remember posting pictures on my wall and making scrapbooks of the Commonwealth Games and the Olympic Games, and cutting out the newspaper articles and sticking them in a scrapbook. And they were my idols. They were my rock stars, So that's how I grew up. And then I hit my early 20s. I put my head down, my bum up, and studied hard. And I thought, well, look, if I'm not going to become an Olympic athlete, I'll become an Olympic physiotherapist. So I got myself into Sydney University and completed a physio degree. And in that time, I was able to come to the realisation that essentially I was barking up the wrong tree with athletics. I loved running, I loved hurdling, I loved the process of training and putting everything into it. But essentially, one injury after another, it made me realise that I was probably putting energy into something that, I needed to decide whether it was career or sport. And that was really the tipping point. And then the second phase of my my career really kicked off after I was fortunate enough to, I worked my way up with a good little career in sports physio and ended up 2007 as the physio for the Australian rowing team, which gave me the most incredible bird's eye view and just all-encompassing understanding of what it takes to be the best, of what it takes to be a world champion or an Olympic gold medalist, working with the likes of Drew Ginn and James Tompkins and Amber Halliday and like all these incredible athletes. And ultimately that rowing trip, when I was immersed for 3 months with those rowers, it made me realise that I was actually on the wrong side of the fence.
And when you say the wrong side of the fence, you mean you didn't want to be working on athletes, you wanted to be the athlete getting worked on.
Absolutely. I was wearing a green and gold tracksuit and you know, riding a bike alongside, you know, with a peloton of coaches watching the World Championships rowing in 2007 in Munich. And I just had this deep, indomitable desire and feeling like that came from a place of that, you know, that 10-year-old girl sitting in front of the TV watching the Olympics. It was something it's really hard to describe, but it was just all consuming. And I knew at the end of that trip that I needed to really ask myself some hard questions and talk to some physiologists and work out if I'm going to exhaust all of my potential as an athlete that I know I can be. I just needed to find a sport that was suited towards my physiology.
Oh, that's powerful. If you were going to exhaust all your potential as an athlete, you had to choose a sport that was going to suit your physiology. By that time I had enough experience in high-performance organisations, having worked for New South Wales Institute of Sport, Rowing Australia, Sydney Swans, and a stint at the AIS. I had enough and also growing up training alongside Olympians and fantastic athletes as a runner, it gave me that understanding of what it takes. And what it takes is that all-in approach. It's just all or nothing. And once I got my head around that and really respected that and saw a couple of athletes who had made that transition from one sport to another, it really opened my eyes and made me realise that perhaps that putting running aside, that there was another sport out there for me. And if I just found that and put all of my eggs in that one basket, that I could be successful. The bit that jumps out to me, Rachel, is 25 years of age. It's quite gutsy to say, right, I've got a career that you're forging there on the professional side as a physiotherapist, but to lay that down in a quest for an uncertain sporting pathway. At 25, many people feel like the horse is bolted, and if they're not already somewhere, then they're never going to get there. This is the part of your story that to me jumps out. What gave you the courage to explore what ultimately becomes your cycling career?
I think it was a mix of. I mean, you're right. You hit the nail on the head. It's courage. It's boldness. But as I said, like I had the exposure to stories of, you know, people who have gone before me, who have jumped in the deep end, who have had that boldness and courage. And I guess I've always been wired to ask questions and to learn, and I've been super curious ever since I was a child. And I guess I just didn't want that regret of not ever having tried. And it was a feeling that was lingering. You know, I would try to finish work early so that I could go and do my training. And, you know, it just came to a point where I just knew that was all I wanted, and that my childhood dream was to compete as an athlete on the world stage in the green and gold. I mean, it's probably easier to look back and say, yeah, it was, you know, a lot of courage, but I guess I was just following one gut instinct after another. And it was the tipping point was coming home after that rowing trip and doing some research, talking to some physiologists who were already in my network, and talking to some people who might be able to direct me in the right put me in the right direction. I knew that rowing, I'd actually had dabbled in rowing through an ex-boyfriend of mine who was a dual Olympian. So there's a few little stories along the way that sort of were little links in the chain, and sort of accumulated conversations that accumulated in my mind one after another. But really all amalgamated to this one tipping point. And I came home from this rowing trip and with this gut feeling of being on the wrong side of the fence. And I Googled these words, talent identification for women's cycling in Australia, because I had an inkling, I had a feeling that that rowing had been exhausted. I wasn't going to make an Olympic rower. That was going to take me probably 20 years to perfect that skill. Running was out of the question because I'd gotten, I'd had injuries one after another with, stress fractures and foot injuries and, the typical sort of, the typical issues that Aussie runners seem to have. And triathlon at that stage was really, really saturated with incredible talent. With Aussie women on the world stage, and cycling was really the only thing left, and it really stuck out. So I Google searched the talent identification opportunities, and the first Google search result that came back was a program in Adelaide where they were searching for female athletes aged 18 to 25 who were looking to potentially transfer from one sport to another.
Wow. And what was your physiology saying? Like you must have known that you had a good engine, you had enough insight to not chase this completely in vain.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I knew that it would need to be a sport where it was relatively low skill base. So I wasn't going to go and try and play golf or tennis. I knew that my chances of succeeding in that would be pretty low. And it would need to be a sport that was endurance based and would be somewhat suited towards power to weight. So I've always been quite a light build, and I've always had quite good strength for my body weight. So with that in mind, I booked a flight down to Adelaide, and I convinced them that I was for real, that I wasn't just this physio from Sydney, and that I was really, really keen on becoming part of the program. And I had to prove myself. Look, I didn't blow the numbers off the charts, but it was good enough to get my foot in the door, and that's exactly all it was. It wasn't by any means an AIS scholarship. It was just a very small key to a very small door, and I packed up a month later and moved from Sydney to Adelaide. All my friends thought I was completely mad, but I said, if you're going to give me a small opportunity, I'm going to take it with both hands. So that's sort of where it all started back in 2008.
Well, I think that's absolutely brilliant. A very small key to a very small door, and that's all you needed. And I think we can all, learn so much from that across any spectrum of life, area of life. All we need is that very small key to a very small door and the willingness to open it and go through it, right? So off you go to Adelaide. And within 5 years, there's some great learnings we can extract there, I'm sure. But you are standing on the World Championship podium with a silver medal for Australia.
That's right. Yeah.
In what event was that, Rachel? I'm so sorry, I couldn't find that in my research.
It was the road race.
It was in the road race.
Yeah.
Amazing.
In Valkenburg in the Netherlands.
So if you like the blue ribbon event, really, the road race, it's the diamond, and you picked up a silver medal. Absolutely incredible. What was going through your head at that point, just 5 years on from convincing these people that you had talent and drive?
Well, it was the perfect, in hindsight, it was the perfect season. I had a lot of racing. I was just racing with a small German team. I wasn't by any means on any of these, on a big, fully fitted out professional team. And, those early years, I pretty much backed myself. Like, I didn't have an AIS scholarship, like I said. And yeah, the World Championships in 2012 was really, I guess you could say, one of the best days of my life. Like, it was incredible, and I think I don't appreciate until now how many things performance-wise have to be in perfect alignment to get an incredible result like that. And it happened very, very early in my career, which is amazing, which is incredible. But it's certainly hard to replicate, that's for sure. But yeah, it was an incredible moment, and just, I was in great shape that day, and it wasn't through anything else but hard work and persistence and dedication. Like just 12 months before that, I'd fractured my pelvis in the Giro, came home and rehabbed myself through this pelvis fracture. But the funny thing was that was exactly the 2 weeks where Cadel Evans was making his way to glory in the Tour de France. So I kept myself on this is only just one of my little rehab stories, but I kept myself on European time so that I could stay up and watch it every night, and did my had the Compex on and had all of my bone healing device and all of these things going while I watched Cadel Evans win the Tour. And then 12 months later, I was standing on a podium myself. So that's one of the little experiences along the way that really sticks in my mind. That sort of really encompasses who I am as an athlete.
And Rachel, to get there though, there were those 5 years of what you've termed adversity stacked obstacles, if you like. And I've read that there was a motto that kept echoing through your head through those adversity stack years to get to that point. Constant dripping wears away the stone.
Yeah, that's my little how do you
motto,
proverb? Yeah, motto.
Maxim. Yes. And what's the origins of that? Constant dripping wears away the stone. Because that's powerful.
Well, it's a Latin phrase or a Latin proverb, which is gutta cavat lapidem. It basically means that persistence prevails. So when you have a naturally slow dripping stream, it over time it wears away the stone, and one drop after another, then you get the result that you need. So that's always been a philosophy that's close to my heart.
And Rachel, we theme this show the highs, lows and learnings. And from the high of your silver medal in the road race in 2012 at the UCI World Championships, it's followed by what would I imagine have been disappointment in missing the London Olympics in 2012. And at that point, you then team up with Brad McGee, well-touted and respected Australian cycling legend, to start to plan a course for Rio. So can you take us through how you overcame the disappointment re-London, or was it never really on your radar? I'm assuming it was. Yeah,
London was actually before the World. So I wasn't really, I was sort of on the long list, I guess. But realistically, I wasn't really being looked at for London. I guess I was always aiming high, and that's in those years leading up to it, that was certainly an objective. But I just kept my head down and kept focused on the World Championships, and I knew that could definitely be my year for my first selection in the green and gold in Europe.
Come 2016, it is, there you are in the Olympic team. But what have you learnt to date? What have you learnt from Brad McGee? What would be your top 3 learnings that he's imparted?
Yeah, the transition to, out of the Adelaide, South Australian system back closer to home, closer to Sydney. I started working with Brad McGee, who's the head coach, cycling coach at the New South Wales Institute of Sport, and obviously an incredible Australian athlete who's done some extraordinary things, a gold medalist, and he's worn the yellow jersey in all 3 Grand Tours. But he's also an exceptional mentor and an exceptional human being. I don't know if I could limit it to only 3 things, but Brad's been quite fundamental to my career. I think probably the best things that I've learned from Brad is to be intuitive, to trust yourself, and to listen to your body. It takes a while. And especially coming into a sport late where you really want to focus on the details and the data and I started using an SRM from the first time I started training. So it took me a while to get that, to get that feeling. I didn't grow up riding a bike. But Brad really taught me sort of how to be a lot more intuitive and listen to my body and get into knowing the rhythm of my body and listen to my body's response to training. And I think that's something that really comes after, it doesn't come in the first 5 years of a full-time athlete in a particular sport, because you're so focused on just doing the normal things, the daily training and so on. And apart from that, I mean, I've learned so many extraordinary things from Brad.
That's great. Brad, you said you didn't grow up riding a bike. I grew up riding a bike, and Brad McGee was one of my early childhood sporting heroes, seeing him ride the pursuit on the track with Phil Liggett commentating. I think in Sydney it was Brad McGee. Wow. So he's not only inspired yourself and obviously been fundamental there in your career to date, but inspired so many.
I think Brad's, he's just got the perfect sort of balance between knowledge and application of, all of the important stuff when it comes to, training and data and the real scientific based necessities and putting those into practice, but also the non-scientific and the intangibles. So the things around the training, like your mental state, like your emotions, and how to get into that mindset of racing. And I never forget my first women's Tour de France race on the Champs-Élysées in 2014. It was one of the first races that Brad came over for. And he stood there and I remember him saying to me, and I was incredibly nervous, and because we're wearing it was a national team race, so I was wearing the green and gold, and I was racing on the Champs, and it was a circuit style race. So it was, I knew it was going to be full gas and hard and technical and fast, from the gun. And he said, Rach, just give yourself to the race. And that's just stuck with me, ever since. And so whenever I'm nervous before a race, I just try to get myself into that mindset that, this is what I'm here for. And you just have to wholeheartedly and willingly just, give everything of yourself.
Give yourself to the race. Terrific.
Yeah.
Gosh. And how did that day on the Champs-Élysées fan out for you?
It was great. I think I attacked solo off the front with 3 laps to go. Got reeled in, but, it's a sprinter's race. Yeah, well, if you weren't going to contest a sprint, you might as well go out in style. And there's that theme coming through, gutsy, Rachel. Rachel, you mentioned just before that there were 3 characteristics of you getting in great shape for 2012: hard work, persistence, and dedication. What would you say, expanding on this sort of theme of 3s, across the board, not just in cycling but in high performance? A hard question, but the top 3 characteristics of high performance or high performers. I think first and foremost, you have to have passion for what you're doing. I've always been passionate about sport and performance and, all of the processes that go into performance. The second is hard work. Nobody, no matter how talented you are, and I think that's a dangerous word, the T word, a talent comes in all shapes and sizes. But if you don't have that understanding for what hard work actually encompasses as an athlete, because you don't get that switch on, switch off. You're an athlete 24 hours a day. You don't get to clock on and clock off. So having that real understanding of what hard work is and being prepared to do that hard work with those end game, with those objectives in mind, that is one of the most important things. And I think, we've seen time and time again incredibly inverted commas, talented athletes, talented young Australians who don't arrive at their, let's say, potential on the world stage because they simply are not prepared to do the hard work. I've come from the opposite school of fish where I don't see myself as an extraordinary physiological engine, an extraordinary talented athlete, but I'm willing to make up for that with hard work. And then I guess the final thing is persistence, because you're not going to go anywhere. Every athlete has challenges, whether they're physical, mental, emotional, environmental. Every athlete has things in their career which they need to overcome. And some people, like in my career, I had more challenges at the early part of my career, just even to get on a bike, let's say, before I stood on a podium. So by the time I stood on a podium, I knew what it was like to suffer through adversity and suffer through challenges. By that point, I knew why I was doing it. And so the persistence, holds such significance because it ends up as the cornerstone for resilient, robust athlete.
You're listening to Rachel Neylan on this featured performer episode, Australian professional and Olympic cyclist, 2012 UCI World Championship silver medalist in the road race. Support for today's show comes from Endure IQ. If you're ready to step up and take control of your training and performance goals, check out Endure IQ. Whether you're an athlete or coach, Endure IQ aims to empower you with the knowledge, tools, and strategies to optimize your sports performance. Founded by Dr. Dan Plews, who you may remember from episode 213, Heat Training and Acclimation for the Endurance Athlete. Endure IQ brings you online courses in the practical application of low carbohydrate, high fat, training fundamentals, and heat strategies. To get you started, Endure IQ will gift you $25 towards your first Endure IQ purchase. Simply use the coupon code BRADBEER, all capitals, one word, at the checkout. Information is useful, but knowing how to use it is powerful. Endure IQ, hitting the sweet spot of performance, health, and enjoyment. Visit endureiq.com. Support for today's show also comes from the Physical Performance Show's brand new online learnings membership, where through Patreon for just $5 per month, you can support the production of the show and receive free access to both the backdated and forthcoming live stream events featuring our popular experts. Former live streams have included Dr. Stephen Seiler on all things polarized training and Dr. Shona Halson on all things optimizing recovery for performance. We have some fantastic live stream events coming your way for 2021. So if you'd like to support the show for just $5 per month, jump over to Patreon and search the Physical Performance Show. And of course, support for today's show comes from Pogo Physio's online telehealth consultations. If you are an endurance athlete suffering from bone, tendon, or joint-related concerns, then Pogo Physio's online 45-minute telehealth consultations with myself or any of the Pogo Physio team can help see you get back to your physical best. Jump over to pogophysio.com.au/telehealth. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, Rachel Neylan, professional and Olympic cyclist. Rachel, before we jump into a performance round, some rapid fire questions. There's a theme that's been echoed across many expert editions of the show, which is primarily focused around optimizing endurance sporting pursuits, and that's fueling for the work required. Let us into the world of your workload each week, how many hours you might be logging on a bike, and then how you fuel for that both before and after.
Yeah, very good question. Obviously, road cycling is pretty metabolically taxing, pretty much fuel demanding. So I would ride anywhere from, depending on the period of time during the year and the sort of phase of periodization, anywhere from a light week would be 18 to 20 hours, but an endurance week in the pre-season might be 25 to 28 hours on the bike. So I had a pretty high volume year last year with not a lot of races. So I guess the more races you do, the more you taper, and the less volume you end up doing. But fuel is it's always the talk of the town with cyclists. It's a very very hot topic at the moment across all endurance sports. But look, I try to keep my ear to the ground with my scientific knowledge. Obviously, being having a degree in having a Bachelor of Applied Science, I've got a pretty good understanding of science, physiology, and nutrition. I just try to keep it simple and fuel for the work required. Like you say, make sure that I'm well fueled for my bigger workouts, a lot more carbs for the harder, high intensity days, and just the timing of the nutrition too is super important. Making sure that I'm really prepared, taking fuel on for the intense workouts, making sure that I've even got an extra little bag of goodies so that I can take them with me on the bike and fill my pockets up, for those harder workouts. So yeah, it is something that's, it is part of the job, something to not, on the side. It's actually integrated into your training program, and it's part of the work that you do. The right or the wrong fueling can make or break a race. So yeah, it's incredibly important. And
there must have been races where you got the fueling wrong, and you've paid handsomely, if you like, for it.
Yeah, that's right. If especially the intense races where you can hardly take your hands off the handlebars, and you need to eat. So then you go back and you learn your lessons, and you try to put, say, more sugars or more carbs in your drink bottle so that you can take on more fuel while you're drinking, as opposed to reaching for your pockets, for example. But yeah, that is part of the challenge of road cycling, is to get it right. And I think you can always learn from poor performances and always try to be better next time.
Rachel, you ready for some rapid fire questions on the physical performance round?
Sure am.
Here we go. Training session most disliked?
Probably if a coach tells me to do a 3-hour ride with no climbs. Like a flat 3-hour ride, it would just be my worst training session.
Not a fan of the flat rides, clearly. Training session most loved?
I love climbing mountains, but I also do love structure and intensity. So if I'm on a good day, there's nothing better than, hitting your targets, just those awesome sensations when you're really going well. So I would say it's, some interval training where you're really, really suffering, and just that feeling of riding home afterwards.
Brilliant. Favourite pre-race meal? What fuels you? What fueled you in Rio 2016, the Olympic Games?
Pre-race meal would either be rice, but living in Italy, there's rice and then there's rice, and also pasta. But it depends what country it is. Yeah, if I'm outside of Italy, then I tend not to order pasta. I'd go for rice. But yeah, if it's good pasta, then yeah. Sure.
Bedtime, morning time, are you quite disciplined around that, unless you're quarantining, having returned from Europe, that is?
Yeah, as long as there's no jet lag. I'm really sensitive to jet lag, especially coming back into Australia. It's like hell for a week. I tend to actually let my body. I try to go to bed at the same time, so like 10:30. Unless it's a special occasion. And I try not to set an alarm. So I let my body speak to me. If I need an extra half an hour sleep, I take it. And then if I have to wake up early for a bunch ride or something, then I'll try and nap in the middle of the day or, after the training session. But generally sleep comes first.
Yeah, let your body speak to you. That's absolutely powerful. Who's the athlete Rachel Neylan most admires, and why?
Oh,
tough one.
That's a really tough one. I've got too many. Yeah, there's some incredible. I mean, Lane Beachley, Chrissy Wellington. They're just a few. Like, I read both of their books during my sort of foundation years, I guess, and had a huge impact on me.
Because Chrissy Wellington was quite late to her success in triathlon too, if I recall correctly.
She was, yeah. She's got a fantastic book and she speaks so well. I've listened to a few podcasts of hers as well. But look, there are so many. There are so many incredible athletes, and I can't tell you how many Aussie athletes I've just read about and watched standing on those podiums. And I think everyone, in their own right, have had an impact on me, whether it's been a book or a podcast or a podium that I've watched them stand on.
Toughest competitor you've ever raced against? Who's that and why?
I would say Marianne Vos. She won gold when I won silver, and she won the Olympics in that same year. She's probably the best, arguably the best bike racer, male or female in our era. She's extraordinary. Yeah, her results speak for herself.
Marianne Vos. Best recovery tip, Rachel?
Sleep.
Nice. Worst injury? Was it that fractured pelvis?
No, I came off at 70k an hour down the Stelvio in 2010 and fractured my mandible. Oof. And knocked my teeth out. And I didn't speak about that one, but that was very early in my career, 2010. And took me a while to recover from that one.
And obviously physically and psychologically regaining confidence, I imagine. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really tough.
Was there a moment there where you considered packing your bags and going back to Australia, or it didn't even enter your head?
No, I mean, I did go back to Australia because I needed to rehab, obviously. But they put me in Innsbruck and the nurses thought I was crazy. I started after the second day after the operation, I started to walk up and down the stairs just to start moving my body again. And I looked out the window of the first landing of the stairs and I could see the Olympic rings of the Olympics where they had it for the Winter Olympics in Innsbruck. And I could see the ski jump and the Olympic ring sitting up there from a distance. And so I would walk, do flights of stairs as the first part of my rehab, and I made a promise to myself.
Well, there you go. And what a great story. The stairs, from the staircase to the actual Olympics. One word to describe your racing style.
Opportunistic.
What was it you said before? You just needed a very small key to a very small door.
Yeah, that's right.
How would you describe being in the zone?
Being at one with yourself, being at one with the race. It's a really hard thing to describe, actually.
And that's why it's in the questions. But I think you've done well. When was the last time, Rach, you were in the zone? I
would say Imola Worlds.
Yeah, wow. I thought you might have said on a quarantine Zwift training session. And final question in the performance round, a bit of a fun one. Dr. Stephen Seiler, physiologist, talks about epic sessions not making athletes champions. But we asked this question, and that's, what's the hardest session you've ever done? Because it's fun.
I think that when you're training at altitude and there's some pretty big mountain passes, when you push over sort of 6 hours and really, really stretch it out and do a proper polarized training day and push out to 7 hours, that's, that can be pretty demanding. But I love that notion of really, the once every 1 or 2 months to do a big challenge. I really rate that.
And that might be a time trial or a session, or you mean just a physically demanding session that really taxes?
Yeah, something that puts you out of your comfort zone, for sure.
I know Louis Delahide, Dutch cycling coach there, who was...
That's right, yeah, it was Louis that said that, yeah.
Yeah, featured guest, and he echoed something similar, which is have these big epic, even if it's multi-sport day of going hiking or trekking or whatever it might be, and I thought that was really great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good concept. I think mentally you need to be taken out of your comfort zone as well as physically.
Well done, Rachel. You're out of the performance round. You could boil everything you've learned from your career to date, which is still running chapters of, to one single piece of advice to help listeners of this show perform at their best. What would be that one piece of advice?
Don't leave any stone unturned.
Don't leave any stone unturned.
Be curious.
Be curious. Be curious. And the thing that's jumping out to me is a very small key to a very small door. You're listening to Rachel Neylan, professional and Olympic cyclist, 2012 World Championship silver medalist in the road race, sharing on her career highs, lows and learnings. Now, if you missed last week's episode 247, featuring another Australian sporting star, Jessica Hull, national record holder in the 1500 metres, 3000 metres and 5000 metres, then here's a little snippet of my conversation with Jess.
So we do quite a bit in the gym for distance runners overall, I would guess. I think the trend is now to see a little bit more focus on strength and conditioning in distance runners as well. But yeah, we do 2 heavy lifts a week after our hard workout. Our hard days are hard. And prior to joining Pete in July last year, I hadn't done any sort of like lifting. We'd done some gym work with Coach Brad at the University of Oregon, but I hadn't lifted anything heavy. Like I'd only used the bar. I'd never done a deadlift. I'd never done a squat with like any weight on the bar or anything. So that was quite a change over the last 12 months. And it's cool because you feel yourself with the contact with the ground, like really improving.
To enjoy the full episode, be sure to jump over to wherever it is that you enjoy your podcast from, or our channel on YouTube, and enjoy the highs, lows and learnings. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, Rachel Neylan, Olympic and professional cyclist, sharing on her career highs, lows and learnings. Rachel, looking ahead, we're about to turn the calendar into 2021, and I believe there's some selection races early in 2021 for the Tokyo Olympic Games. Obviously, you've got your eyes firmly fixed there. What's ahead for you between now and then?
Well, as you said, we're on the same time zone, so it's been easier for us to connect. I spent 2 weeks in quarantine, took that hit, decided to come back to Australia, which I'm very, very grateful that I was able to. Yeah, I was able to see my family, and I'm spending a couple of weeks in Bright in the Victorian high country at the moment, doing some solid base kilometres. And then I'll spend some time just south of Sydney in the Southern Highlands, which is my New South Wales go-to training ground, and spend some more pre-season training there, and then head back to Europe. There are a few races I'll do a race at the Tour Down Under, which is just a national series race this year, obviously without the Europeans coming over. And then head over to Europe and get ready for the season. I mean, there's still a lot of uncertainties for the beginning of the season next year. It depends on the COVID situation over there, which is obviously not great at the moment. That's pretty much the program.
And gosh, hasn't women's cycling, there's evidently still a long way to go in prize money and sponsorships and different things, but from when I was a junior to now, I mean, that's a 3-decade span, but it's come a long way. You must be proud of that, but obviously there's ways to go. Where do you see the future of women's cycling, Rachel? Yeah,
it's not really a short conversation to be had. You're open a can of worms here. Look, yeah, you're right. It is a bit polarized. Like there's some aspects have really grown, but some aspects, unfortunately, are still not good enough. And yeah, look, some of our races are being put on the same stage as the men. For example, the Cadell Evans Great Ocean Road Race have done an amazing job with that. And, we share an equal stage with the men. We have broadcast. Same with some of the Ardennes and some of the Flanders Classics. But for the Giro d'Italia, for example, and the Tour de France, we're just still not on that same stage as the men, which is really disappointing. So I think for our sport to really move forward in the way that it deserves, we need that stage at the Tour de France and at the Giro d'Italia, like we do at the World Championships. So yeah, until that happens, I think it's very, very difficult for women's cycling to pay the women what they deserve without the broadcast and without the ability to sell the sponsors the proper return on investment.
Yeah, so still work to be done by the set. Well, I think anyone that's close to the sport can see that and knows that, but hopefully things are moving in the right direction. Obviously, COVID's tipping the world upside down in so many ways, but one thing for sure is everyone's looking ahead to Tokyo 2021 with fingers crossed.
But the amazing thing is through social media that we know that there's a demand for it, and the global rise of cycling as a sport in every single country has just been an amazing it's been quite amazing to be part of it the last 10 years, and I've seen it just go from strength to strength as a global a global popularity in cycling in general. So to be a female athlete, in the sport, it's pretty special, but it'd be good, I think, if people stopped calling it women's cycling. It's just cycling.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we don't call it women's tennis and men's tennis anymore.
Good point. I stand corrected as well.
Well, it's just like, you just got to reframe we have to reframe the way that we think about it. It's just one sport, and there might be two different races, but it's still the one sport. And you know what? I think it's people like yourself speaking out about it and challenging, people that probably have no ill intentions, but just are so used to phrasing something one way. Even challenging the vocabulary, I think, is a powerful force. I've always been one to challenge normal. Well, I'm replacing my labelling of the sport with one word. So I say thank you. Rachel Neylan, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. So what's Rachel Neylan's physical challenge going to be? It can be entry level or it can be extremely difficult. I would say do something that you've been putting off. One thing a day that you've been putting off for a long time, and try to do that thing. For a week? For a week. Every day, try to do one thing that you've been putting off. It can be like tiny, or it can be something bigger. Oh, I think that's going to unlock a lot of good things for people, Rachel. That's an absolute ripper. That's a first. Like it could be habits, or it could be just, but then if you just get over that mindset of like, oh, I've got to do that thing, or I've got to do that, it's just, and you propose it to yourself as a little challenge. I like it. That's I'm taking that on myself. And if we do take the challenge on, we must let Rachel know. And Rachel, you're easily found over on social, Rachel Neylan. And just before we went live, you said that the origins of that are Irish. Yeah, that's right. My grandfather immigrated from Ireland. So, I've got some rich Irish history up there in County Clare. So very, and I'm got to be very grateful for my grandfather, because I'm able to have an Irish passport too, which is a great help as an Aussie living in Europe. Oh yeah, gosh, that's a game changer. Yeah. And Rachel, just finally, to any of the females out there who, look at cycling and are a little bit intimidated, you picked up the sport, in terms of a career quite late, 25. What would you say to encourage them around reducing that burden or that overwhelm that can so easily grab people and keep them from having a go? Yeah, I think, cycling is such an amazing sport. It gives you so much. It just gives you so much ability to see the world, to experience freedom, to be fit, to be active, to be healthy. It's a lifestyle as well as a sport, I think my best advice is that you don't need to have, the flash-looking bike and all of the Lycra set up just to enjoy riding a bike. And don't be put off by the big groups with Lycra. And, cycling can be a little bit cliquey with that kind of thing. And I would just encourage people that, if you want to experience it, just get on a bike and go for a ride with your friends, or, go and ride on the bike path. Or I even learnt to ride in a park. I was so scared to ride on the road, back in the early days. So, there are no rules. And the most important thing is that you feel secure and safe and that you enjoy it. Yeah, what a powerful way to end. Rachel, thank you for your contribution to the Physical Performance Show, and certainly going ahead, we wish you all the best and plenty more career highs to come. Yeah, thanks so much, Brad. I really enjoyed it, and I just want to say congrats on the show, and I've really enjoyed some of your guests. You're a super connected guy. You've got a lot of words of wisdom coming through these episodes, so thank you. Well, thank you for supporting it, and thank you for contributing directly as well. Rachel Neylan. My pleasure. See you guys.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust you enjoyed Rachel's share-ins. What a fantastic physical challenge for the week. So empowering. I am taking that one on myself. And if you take it on, then do reach out and let Rachel know by tagging her in on social media at Rachel Neylan, RACHNEYLAN. And use the Physical Performance Show at Physical Performance Show as well. So many great learnings. If you'd like to jump over to the show notes for further resources relating to this episode, then jump over to pogophysio.com.au/podcast. Now, I think we'd all agree it's time to drop the label women's cycling and let's be united with the phrase cycling, as Rachel so well stated. And I also, in particular, love that phrase, give yourself to the race. I'll be using that in the months ahead as I get ready for what will be my first Ironman triathlon in Cairns in June 2021. If you'd like to follow my training journey, I'm sharing it on Strava to search Brad Beer. And just like yourself, I'm trying to apply the many learnings that we all take and enjoy from the fantastic guests on this show. Now, as you heard earlier, we have launched the Physical Performance Show's Learnings membership. It's a request we've had many times over the years of production of the show, and that is, how can people practically support the show's production? Podcasts are certainly free to enjoy. However, they are certainly not free to produce, with lots of resources going into it behind the scenes. So big shout out to this week's new patron, Jeff Marsh. Jeff, thank you for your support of the show. Now, if you'd like to support the show, jump over to Patreon and search for the Physical Performance Show, and there you can pledge your support for $5 per month. And in return, we'll grant you access to all of our live stream events, terrific learning opportunities that were enjoyed by coaches, practitioners, and athletes world over in 2020. A massive thanks to those leaving ratings and reviews over on iTunes. And of course, if you've been enjoying the show, don't forget to hit subscribe from wherever it is that you enjoy your podcast from. We have the YouTube channel up and running now, the Physical Performance Show, where we will be sharing video snippets from recordings going forwards. Massive thanks to the great folk who have made this show possible today and every episode since we kicked off way back on episode 1. Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, and Matthew Walding on all things show graphic design. Now, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, you are in for a real treat to close out the 2020 calendar year. I recently secured Gustav Eden for a conversation around his recent PTO Daytona Challenge triathlon victory. And for those that know the sport of triathlon, you'll be well aware that Gustav took out the 2019 70.3 World Championships in Nice just 8 days after a 4th place in the grand final of the World Triathlon Series Championships in Lausanne. Gustav is just 24 years of age and shares some fantastic insights around his performance, including dealing with nerves before an event, and how it is that he can look calm on the outside but actually need to, in his words, puke several times before he races. Gustav shares why winning is truly a choice and so much more. So be sure to be tuning in next week for Gustav Eden. And looking further ahead from that, we have some expert editions coming your way. A return for Dr. Joe Lucan around all things the psychology of sport and children. Dr. Dan Robinson, ear, nose, throat surgeon, around nasal breathing and how you can optimize it as an athlete. Inigo Mojica around tapering for optimizing performance, and so much more. So we are in for a treat with some upcoming expert editions. And of course, we will review the 2020 year best of expert editions and featured performers as well. So until next week, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.